AI has transcended from a technological curiosity to a C-suite level mandate for survival and growth. This shift is absolute and non-negotiable. According to the Gartner 2025 CEO survey, a staggering 77% of CEOs believe AI will have the most significant impact on their industries. IDC's research confirms this urgency, with 59% of organisations stating Gen AI will have a significant or disruptive impact on their business operating model within 18 months. The consequences for data leaders are stark. The 2025 CDAO agenda predicts that by 2027, 75% of CDAOs who are not seen as indispensable collaborators in their organisation's AI success will lose their C-level position. So, what do data leaders do? Becoming AI native is about far more than adopting new tools. It's about transforming how an organisation thinks, operates, and creates value. As artificial intelligence moves from experimentation to embedded intelligence, the organisations that lead are those that treat data not as an asset, but as an operating core. Those who see AI not as a bandwagon, but as an operational essential. This episode explores what it truly means to be data-centric and AI native, where insight, automation, and intelligent action are woven into every layer of the business. We'll discuss how to build the right data foundations, enable responsible autonomy, and prepare for the rise of agentic AI. From cultural change to architectural readiness, our guests will share how forward-thinking organisations are aligning people, processes, and platforms to thrive in the AI native era. It's a conversation about evolution, not just deploying AI, but becoming AI. Sam, Julian, welcome to the podcast. How are you both doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty busy, but good times.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have you both back with us. Today, we're talking about what it means to become an AI native company. What does that look like, and how do our chief data officers and analytics officers of today need to, essentially embrace that transition that organizations are going through, or risk getting moved out of the way in their own organizations, or also seeing other competitors in their space encroach on their value offering. We're here working with Matillion, an AI native organization. Let's start with some of the learnings that we've seen over the past 6, 12, 18 months and how we've transitioned into that space.
Yeah, I mean, maybe starting with some of the use cases of where we're seeing this AI native stuff crop up in the organization. Engineering is a great example. We have, coding agents. I've spoke about these a lot of times. You've got developers as essentially supercharged by coding agents, and that also translates to data engineering as well. So your Claude Code cursors, those AI native agents.
Mm-hmm. And so, what people are just becoming more productive with their code? Isn't there a risk that they're, just producing spaghetti instead of actually tangible evidence? How have you changed as an engineering leader? Have you changed your mindset to essentially become a reviewer of other people's use of LLMs and agentic systems?
Yeah, I think so. Software engineering, I suppose data engineering as well. Like, you tend to have practices in place for testing these things, like testing data quality in data engineering, or software testing is like unit tests, integration tests.
Yeah.
Those are what you can fall back on. You're not just generating lots of code, you're also generating lots of tests. You validate that the tests are actually testing the right functionality. And then, as we're seeing adoption in engineering here go up massively. You've got some people who are now at least 10x productivity gains on previous, with output of coding, shipping more functionality. And then, obviously that leads to the need to review more code. But there's also now agentic AI reviewing code as well. So, the first thing I'll always do in my workflow, write some code. The first thing I do is get Claude to review that code again. I give it a clean conversation. I say, review this code. And it comes back, and I give it at least a few iterations myself before giving it to a human. But we are seeing definitely an increase in, pull requests where we submit our code and put it up for review, a massive increase in the number of those being raised now.
Yeah. And in the kind of data analytics space, it's you get the same kind of productivity gains. And the speed allows you to be more curious and lets you investigate hunches more rather than thinking, oh, I ought to check that, but it was going to take me a day. It gets pushed to the back of the to-do list. But I could set an agentic system off investigating something and get a report back just on a hunch, and that's cost me 10 minutes. And that makes it more practical to run down things you wouldn't have had time for, wouldn't have bothered.
But both of you have already made that leap of like early adoption of these agentic systems and frameworks, and also like this agentic way of thinking about how you like solve those problems, how you review the code at scale, and how you're happy with those outcomes. If we take it back a few months or years perhaps to when we first started engaging with these AI native systems and frameworks, what was it for you, Sam, personally, that helped you make the leap of like, oh, this isn't just a chatbot, this is something else, and here's how I can think about using it at scale across the enterprise? Because that, what you're describing there is a fully agentic driven development of a product. In this case, your use case here is the engineers that are building a platform using code under the hood. You're responsible for developing all of that. But to then have that vision of execution and delivery, can you remember, or can you pinpoint a moment where you were like, oh yeah, now I can see the value of what this can offer and how it can achieve?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit biased and probably had a better start than most because I built Matillion's first copilot, as we called it back then. So I've been working with this technology as it's got better, building stuff with it. So, then essentially it's kind of cheating really, isn't it? That then when these other tools come out that essentially do a similar thing in a different field, I just kind of get them and know how to prompt them. But like for me, it always started with like ChatGPT or whatever. That's what everyone, let's be honest, that's where everyone really started when AI or Gen AI became mainstream. And, I always use the example of like, can you give me a recipe for spaghetti bolognese, or the simple stuff you used to ask, where you needed a quick answer. And I still use it for those things today. And that was probably a couple of years ago. That was really all it was good at, and text summarization and generation. And then over time, it's not been that small of an increment. Like, Claude Code, I talk about a lot because that's my favorite, coding agent of choice. Really, I don't even think that's been around a year. And like, even the jump from when they first released it to now has been so significant that they're just kind of wearing away at the barriers of like what it can do. And like, you get blown away by the tasks it can complete that it previously wasn't able to do.
I'd say the biggest learning for me over the last few months of this change is equally how you feed them information beyond it just being talking to the chatbot. It's the innate knowledge that the model has had at the time of training, which is the things like the Gemini's deep research or similar, with the ability to search, look for information, collate information, operate at a scale in terms of research, whether that's analysis like, okay, we've heard about a potential competitor product. Can we get a summary of them and how it compares to us? Well, that's a perfect task for a deep research bot to go off and Google that company, their product, it's what their specs and similar. Or equally just learning to combine possible sources that maybe you wouldn't have time to read yourself, but like I've got a bunch of docs from the company website, from the company's internal notes. I've got a Slack channel of conversation of us talking about something, collating all that up and just saying, all right, can you sort this out and give me your thoughts on this, or give a summary of this view. Super quick and very effective.
It's like having a team of assistants, capturing all of that pieces of information and summarizing that up. And like what you're describing there is a great use case that now we're seeing some of these agentic AI models come to fruition in terms of what they can start to offer us. We're seeing more of those productivity gains internally day to day. But when you started, Julian, you've been long in the game of AI as a concept, and then we've now got this new branch of generative AI that's opened up way more of those avenues for us. How did you make a leap from a chief data science officer making that bridge from, okay, this is non-deterministic, this is text generation, here's how my team can use this effectively in a way? Like what was that leap?
I think it's realizing it's almost a bit like taking a people leader's view to it, which is you send somebody off, you send a bright member of your team off to do something, you probably still have some criteria. You've got to give them a decent brief, and you've got to be clear on what you want, and you've got to have some criteria. How am I going to judge whether they've done a good job or not? How am I going to evaluate what's coming back to me?
So it still comes back to the basic principles of testing.
Testing, having some criteria for checking it rather than just blind acceptance of what comes back.
Right.
How can I validate it? I think what helps you come from a data science background is why things are more probabilistic. You're used to things not having 100% view of the picture of the truth. You're used to a data set that's incomplete and scrappy and probably inconsistent. And if you wait for perfect data, you never do anything. So it gets you a mindset to say, okay, well, this is probably the best intelligence we can get at this point. And that helps with the mindset, embracing the Gen AI. Say, well, it might not be perfect. It can't be 100% reliant, but it's probably a pretty good steer. We want to then combine it with other things we know to validate it. I think it's how do you then join that to the pieces of knowledge you have already or the facts you have already.
So we've been talking a lot about like how we've adopted it, like personally, and for the processes that we do sort of day to day. For me, it's I use a blend of that summarization use case. Go and tell me everything about what's happened with this interaction in the past few weeks, or go and read through the call history that I've had with this particular person, and help me identify where there's opportunity. So it's helping with that sort of summarization piece. But when we take out that kind of the quick wins, that low hanging fruit that we have, what do you see as some of the biggest sort of like people upgrades the agentic AI can offer our day-to-day leaders in organizations? Like we're speaking to chief data officers and analytics officers all the time about what an agentic future looks like for them. What do they need to be concerned with now, and how can they leverage generative AI to transform into an AI native business?
I suppose it depends what they want their business to be like. If you think at the end of the day, agentic AI now means that essentially one person can do the job of many people. So they will essentially have a powerhouse of additional work that they didn't. And what you always hear when I've ever spoke to someone, some of our customers, that they always have a backlog of data engineering work bigger than they can ever get through. And hopefully now with agentic AI, they can hire more people. And they can give them agents, and essentially that person who has that backlog of work can now do 5 times the amount of work. Like that's a huge, massive thing. And yes, that might require buying a certain agentic tool or technology that costs money, but that's likely to be more efficient and less than hiring another person, for example.
So stick with the team that you've already got, make them more productive.
Yeah, sure. Keep the knowledge, capturing the knowledge that's within the organization. I think it's a really rich area too, because you get that if you can get that into an agentic framework, into a copilot system or similar, your coding standards, or in the data space, kind of your known problems, your known issues, your details of the data, that then empowers sharing of that knowledge with even a new team member or across the team.
Right, so treating these agentic systems as almost humans.
You've got to train them. You got to share. Okay, if you had a new member of your team, person joining your data team, you got to show them which database to use, which connections to use. You probably want to give them get them to talk to the experts in the field that use the systems that can tell them all the kind of gotchas.
Yeah,
the fact that how this particular sort of credit use was calculated, changed a year ago, so that you've got to be aware that there's going to be then inconsistency in the table. That's the sort of thing you share with a new data engineer or a new analyst. You want to share that with your agentic assistant and make sure that then anybody in the team using that is getting reminded of those little facts that otherwise decay over time.
That's why it's important. Like if you can think of most agents, or you start a new conversation even in ChatGPT, it's essentially a chat where the agent has amnesia, right? Doesn't remember anything. And some of this stuff Julian talks about is like the best tools out there right now are the ones where the agent learns over time, because you don't want it to have to look this information up every single time and build this context up. You want to have reusable context and reusable memory so that these agents do learn, as Julian says. You give them documentation on how your business works, or your data landscape or something like that. You don't want to tell it every time and have it go and figure that out every time. It should have that in its knowledge and its memory.
Likewise, where the agent is doing a technical or semi-technical task, you want it to start learning from that, or you want something in the system to be collecting that information to save time the next time it attempts it. You'll often find that by that letting the agents take notes in some form, it means they're not necessarily that they didn't solve it the first time, but it'll probably solve it much faster the second time around because it doesn't go down blind alleys.
So then I guess what we're saying here is that our visionary CDOs, the ones that are looking to build AI native companies or transform their existing organizations into AI first organizations, are the ones that are going to be able to onboard these agentic systems with speed and keep that reinforcement learning.
Give them the right information, keep the reinforcement learning going. But this is where they can innovate. They don't need to. You can innovate in this space without competing with the great model builders. A lot of the innovation we've done is all about what information we give. In our case, Maya, what a time it executes, or time to make a decision, and how it gets the right context, how it gets the right notes, how you curate what comes to it, and the levers it has to pull. And that's what the owner of the system can innovate with, and that's where they can be a hero within their own organization and really drive things forward.
But we are seeing a shift now from people Claude Code writes 80-90% of my code now, but that means I can write more. But like I say, I write more, it writes more, and I review it. But now there's a data literacy problem. So if you've not got good documentation, and we've spoke to a lot of customers, a lot of them don't have good data catalogs, for example. What is going to make your agent in the data space much better is having a really good data catalog. So I think the work will shift from physically doing and building data pipelines or writing software code to actually curating and making sure that the documentation, the best practices, everything you have, whether it's Confluence or Word docs, is in a really good format, accessible, and then provided as context. But that has to be up to date, otherwise.
And that's where we see the opportunities for agents to collect and update that information automatically.
Right.
I think that's vitally important because that's data catalog exercises are usually huge amounts of admin work, and of course, the second you stop it, the information starts to age.
Okay.
So we're looking for ways you can systematically collect that information.
So if you're a leader in your organization today and you're looking to build that agentic native or that AI native mindset of tomorrow, we need to onboard agentic tools into our ecosystem, train people on how to use them effectively, and also train the models themselves, or
instruct the models.
Provide them with that context-rich understanding of that business.
Take advantage of their ability to document things well.
So how do we see those humans that were previously doing tasks in your world, Sam, coding, and in our world of data science or data engineering, it would be like a human data engineer. How do we see their roles shifting left up that to providing models with those, for those contextual systems? Is that something that we'll see become a more important part?
I see the role of your role as the curator or the librarian that's managing the resources available,
right?
Making sure they're well understood and documented. I don't know how it finds in the coding space, but
yeah. I mean, it's the same. To be honest, in software, it's quite unique. The coding editors are really good at making changes in a single code base, but this. There's a lot more to software engineering. I mean, even in the past, people said that writing code is only 10% of software engineering or something crazy like that. There's all the stuff around operationalization, monitoring, observability, then releasing the code, deploying the code. And each one of those is a complicated system. It might be that you write a Java app and then you happen to deploy that into Kubernetes and you happen to monitor that with a Grafana and Prometheus stack, an observability tool. You're expecting the agent to have knowledge of across all of those, have context and work across them all, maybe one day, but not at the moment. So the human essentially becomes the driver and the orchestrator of these agents. I might use it to write some code, and then I might switch to it to look at some logs or fix a bug that I've seen in some logs, and you become the orchestrator.
Where I can see it in the analytics space, the analytics spaces, it might be start with pieces of work where we did them with one-offs as a piece of research.
Yeah.
Now it might become a repeatable scheduled task. So rather than do a deep dive analysis of adoption of our product and or what kind of persona is using what feature, that's something you might do once a month or once a quarter with a human analyst chasing it. I can see a world where that's a scheduled task that runs every week to say, okay, look at our usage data, see if there's any interesting trends, drill into them, and then flag up to people whether anything that's worth their notice worth digging into. Comes back to the human user.
Well, I mean, you're highlighting a really good use case for investing in that analytics organization already that most of our, all of our enterprise customers have already invested heavily into creating, advanced analytics and business insights. But, there is a real risk here for these organizations that don't start identifying and being curious with their data, that they're going to start to lose out to these native AI companies that are coming on, organizations like Lovable and others in that space that we're seeing become the sort of go-to. I mean, we all saw ChatGPT release OpenAI released their browser, and Prophecy went free with theirs this week as well. There's
there's certainly also there's opportunities. I think there's a lot of opportunities for companies that want to get more AI native.
Yeah,
that might have a lot in terms, particularly if you've got outsourced or offshored resource doing particular tasks, especially in the analysis phase. There's a lot of overhead then just going back and forth between teams. In like, okay, if I want this analysis task done, I've got to hand it off to our analytics team that might be in a different country, different time zone. There's the potential for stuff to be lost in translation. There's a potential for that. And then there's literally the physical hours of the day as things move back and forth, when that task could go instead to an agent at your fingertips as a domain expert.
Yeah.
So you've
it's
become
worth
more
pointing out that whilst we do run this podcast, we are also providers of an agent, Maya, that does do all of those things for data engineers and, an MCP server ready, deployment. So without straying into the weeds on what Maya can offer, it's more focusing also on like how we can help educate on those leaders, those analytics leaders in those lines of business. How do they update their model of thinking about these problems? Because it's a big shift, right?
Yeah, so I'm very bullish on this. Like, at the end of the day, if there are businesses out there and they're not becoming AI native, they're not getting people, they're not encouraging every single person, and they're not questioning why everyone in that organization isn't trying to use AI, they will lose to the company that does. And we're seeing, like, even internally for us with adoption, like, there are people that need a nudge, and like actually measuring is quite hard. So you do get metrics from some of the tools you use, like how many lines of code did Claude write, or things like that. But that's not necessarily a great reflection of, like, did that, has that person used it and did it actually solve the problem and add value? But like, I think for us, it's been less about trying to measure it to be like, hey, you're not using AI, so you're fired. It's more about like, hey, why aren't you using it? What can we do to help you use it? Because we want you to be as productive as you can. We want you to look good with your peers. And I do think it falls down to individuals. If you've got, one engineer or data engineer using it, they've become 5-10x more productive, and you've got one that isn't, they're going to get left behind, and they're not going to look as good, when they go for their performance reviews and that sort of thing. Like,
just the sheer amount you can get done.
It's got to be from the top that this is pushed down. Like our CTO, Ed Thompson, in our engineering org, he set a small group of people up that we called like the AI Dev Tool Committee, and that committee evaluated some of the tools and is the first group that will take a new tool in and try and evaluate it. And then we essentially are the people that go out to the rest of engineering and advocate for it and be like, look, why aren't you using this? And slowly over time, you go back to your teams, and you start to see bits of it kind of growing out, almost like growing into teams. And then you've got teams sharing this all. And like, I would encourage anyone, like, if you're not pushing your teams to use it, you should be, because it's not going anywhere.
There's another factor in this, that the principle we had found earlier on when we were developing was that because the tech is moving so fast, it was often worth parking something. If something half worked, you kind of park it for 3 months, 6 months, and then try again as the newer models or newer tooling systems came out. And it may well also be the case, I think, for organizations looking at adopting it, that if some of the team have tried it and they've not been convinced, or they thought, okay, well, I could see it was sort of useful, but it wasn't, when you tried it last year, it wasn't quite precise enough. So you went, oh no, it's not for me. I'd encourage them to like regularly retry. If you're of the mindset, say, I can see this where this might help, but I don't trust results right now.
Yeah.
Keep coming back to it until it meets your standards.
Yeah.
You may have, people are going to have different thresholds for what's good enough, but.
And I guess that's the biggest risk for organizations that have a build versus buy approach, right? Because if you're building all of this in-house, if you're there as a CDO today thinking, how do I build my own agentic platform for my data teams to take advantage of, then you're going to run the risk then of having to essentially keep all of your models up to date, keep advancing and analyzing new technologies. Like, talk us talk us through. I mean, I've seen loads of customers that I'm speaking to at the moment today raising really great questions on, oh yes, but how does mine handle this, or how does mine handle that? And normally I'm listening to all of their concerns that they've raised with the systems that they've built internally when trying to tackle these agentic projects. In fact, 95% of agentic projects fail to get off the ground primarily because they don't have the right data. But how would we think about advising those build mindset organizations when it comes to things like keeping models updated and keeping a platform operationally sound under the hood? I know that I'm preaching to the converted here because we've built a platform that handles all of that and does all of that for us, but you're outlining some of these real risks if you do go with the build approach, right?
Stuff becomes outdated very quickly if you're not continuously updating it.
Right.
If you're not monitoring its performance, looking at and basing the latest and available models, you're definitely going to fall behind in comparison to somebody that's updating it for you and handling all of that, the mechanics first of all. I think that there's a whole lot of work just to keep it stable and on top of what's the best performance that you can have.
So it isn't just as simple as building a wrapper around an OpenAI model or an Anthropic model like that. Right. There's so much more to context engineering and memory management and conversations and all of this stuff that people probably don't understand that goes into some of these, because they log into ChatGPT, type a message and get a magical response.
Oh, that's me. I log in every day and I'm like, oh mate, I want to build this today. Yeah. And it tells me, it comes back and says, yeah, sure, no worries. Like, let's proceed. And then, I've wasted 3 hours later and I've not got anywhere with it because I've not got the right.
But it goes from like the more philosophical things of like, do you have the team size to build and maintain this thing? Like, we're an entire engineering business and our entire directive is to build Maya. Like, if you're building a smaller version of that and a small little team, you're not going to be able to maintain it. You're not going to keep it up to date. And then there's the other side of it of actual like technical limitations. Like, if you're a big vendor working on AWS or GCP, the likelihood is you get much higher rate limits than a smaller team. And agentic AI applications are very token heavy
and can be very spiky and can be subject to spikes from around them.
Yeah, so you need good engineering practices for failover resiliency, and by the time you start doing that, you realize that it's like a big software engineering problem, and you can't just solve that with a small team.
The other factors we see is obviously, is it something that's just sitting out there chucking out spaghetti code or chucking out generating code, or have you built the structures around it that actually capture it and make it explainable, make it understandable, maintainable effectively in terms of what's being generated? Because it's easy to create, it's harder to maintain, I think, if you're.
And then probably the hardest thing actually, and we know this firsthand, is actually evaluating and making sure the system is behaving. Like every change and every tweak you make, you're essentially having to validate and evaluate a non-deterministic multi-step reasoning process. It just doesn't, like, it's incredibly difficult, and like just building that out alone requires an entire team. As Julian.
Talk us through, because you've built a gym recently, right? Well, not a normal gym.
Not a normal. Julian. As you can tell by my perceived, it's not the normal gym. But
you've been working with who?
So the things we were exploring is like, how do you test and evaluate, and how do you build scenarios really to set up how you can set up repeatable ways to evaluate performance, because it's not deterministic. So it's no good running your regression testing pack once because it's not deterministic. All right, it worked once, but maybe it might be actually only working 1 in 3 times. So you need things that are repeatable and be able to execute it multiple times and then evaluate the results. You frequently end up with a system where you've got, the way we're managing things, you have a large language model playing the role of the tester, walking Maya through the testing scenario, the scenario it's trying to do, and then a third large language model actually evaluating the results, looking at the conversation and scoring it on certain criteria. And finally, the human analyst occasionally looks at the large language model as a judge results. So do I agree with that? Just a sanity check.
Brilliant.
Of what's going on. Once you've got that kind of framework in place, you can experiment more. You can try different variations. You can keep, you try different models, you try different prompts, you try. There's a lot that lets you scale up the evaluation of what the best combination of prompt, model, hyperparameters, and the rest.
I mean, that's such a complex framework of agent-driven training. Like that, you know, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a loaded question, which I don't know the answer to, Julian. But when you were designing that gym and framework, were you thinking of when you're, you know, you're incredibly intelligent data science leader? Were you thinking of that organically, or are you consulting with LLMs and with models to help kind of build some of these frameworks out in the kind of design approach?
A little, yeah, chunk of talking to the models or evaluating. They're very good for brainstorming and talking through ideas, and that's part of it. Also for just condensing and churning through the latest academic papers and what's out there. So you're kind of looking at sources of information, what's coming out of people's press releases and industry of techniques, alongside of transcripts of YouTube courses, summarized versions of what's being published as papers, all to collate, to keep on top of the volume of changes in the field.
I mean, it sounds like you're basically doing a master's every day in terms of the amount of content you can actually.
Yeah, we want to try and automate that process rather than manually.
It's one of my favorite use cases of like agentic AI now is this way, and like the way I do it. So there's a tool called Obsidian. It's like a markdown notes application, and you can build a knowledge graph in it, but that's not the key part. Like the fact that it's all your notes is marked down. And then essentially you can use a coding agent on top of that, such as Claude or Cursor. And you essentially just vibe, document and chat and bullet point. And then over time, you just start kicking out lots of documents about ideas and thoughts and because it's just files on a machine, textual files on a machine, you can just keep iterating on that. And that is the way that I will now brainstorm or a new idea or some thoughts. I'll start with a few bullet points, and then in 20 minutes or less, I've got 5 or 6 documents of different opinions and implementation strategies, all the way to the point where I might then condense that down into an implementation specification that I essentially go, okay, write that into a spec now and go and implement this. So not only are we probably doing that for things like the test framework, we're actually doing that for like pretty much everything we build now.
Wow.
It's definitely a crazy way of using AI that I didn't think would be here.
I mean, there are other experiments for exploring that. How do we get the AI to teach itself and practice? That's my next barrier that I'm working on.
Oh,
That's our kind of setting things up that it can do a bunch of exercises and take notes, and then hopefully speed its operation in the future.
So we've talked a little bit about the people changes in terms of the mindsets that AI leaders have in organizations, but also the humans inside of those organizations for how to adopt agentic AI into their sort of day-to-day. We've talked about some of the processes that both of your teams have adopted to become an AI native organization, how we think about driving innovation for our own customer base here, using AI native sort of best practices and tips and processes. Let's talk about the third aspect of that, products. When do we need to shelve a product that isn't behaving in an agentic manner? Have you had any of those recently? Are there ways in which you now are looking at existing technology stacks that are out there and just saying, well, that's not helping me or my organization become an AI native space? And how do you sort of go through that evaluation? I know it's a bit of a big question. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like for us, obviously, I said we from an engineering org have that committee. So that is a group that's essentially taking the strain off all the other teams and engineers, because essentially there is a new AI. We're in a bit of a bubble. Let's not mistake that.
Yeah.
But there is a new AI technology company coming out every day, a new startup. Very unproven, but like really cool ideas. And you kind of don't want everyone suddenly going, well, I want to use that, or I want to use this, or I want to use this. You want a committee or a group to evaluate those in a more systematic, measurable way. And I think that feeds into kind of what the question you asked around, like that committee can also look to kind of shelve something. Like in our org, we were using GitHub Copilot for a long time, and now Claude Code is our most used offering. But we still know that people have preferences, because Claude Code's very different. We have some people using Cursor, we have some people using Windsurf, but effectively as an as a business, we don't want licenses with everyone. We want one platform that we can trust and do everything we want to do with.
That takes on what I was going to put on this, which is working out kind of independent of the tools, how are you going to evaluate? How are you going to make a judgment call about what's good and what's bad? Because there's a lot of stuff out there that is a bit random and can't actually meet the needs. As you said, like 95% of the projects fail, and I'm assuming that the tools will not. A lot of the tools you'll see won't be fit for purpose. But kind of thinking before you start, almost, how am I going to judge whether this is actually helping me do my job? That's probably having a clear-cut definition. It's a bit of a scientific approach, really. It's like, all right, how would I score this? How would I rate this? And that can be partly subjective. It can be, I'm just going to put it in front of 5 experienced people and have them vote yes or no whether we should adopt it, but build some framework for judging what's good and what's bad.
Okay, so we've got a framework for judging, we've got a committee for sort of approving all of that through. But if you're a chief data officer of a product in your organization, or in a product as that is in the space that you're offering, like, it's really sink or swim time, right? Like, either it's transform into that AI native product offering and mindset, or we're going to start to see, as you just listed off, 6 huge productivity gaining code generation engines that are out there for software engineers today. And we know as the lead provider of data engineering agentic teams with our agentic team Maya, we know that there is other avenues of organizations, albeit ours is in data engineering and beyond in that data analytics space. There are other aspects like finance and operations where we're going to start to see these AI native tools and products pop up into those organizations. What would your advice be to a people leader of, say, a operations focused, like a manufacturing, or like a more less technical focused?
I would say think about what happens. Let's say you change your process, you embrace and similar. Envisage what life looks like in 6 or 12 months. Think about, okay, well, how am I going to manage what I've got? How am I going to keep track of what I've built? How am I going to understand what's coming out? And what are the tools I'm adopting ones that make it easy for me to keep on top of all the productivity they're giving me? Am I generating a whole lot of stuff that's actually just spiraling the work? So trading off productivity gains in creation for a massive maintenance overhead, or am I doing something that's actually helping me maintain as well as generate?
Okay,
that would be my first piece.
Nice.
I think the other one I could say is think about how your team are going to learn.
Okay,
the other factor.
So think about how the team are learning and ensuring that the quality of the
quality, and how you can measure the quality of it, and then think about how you can maintain what it generates.
Yeah, we're finding the measuring bit. It's really difficult to get right because, at the end of the day, we're talking about measuring the currently human process, right? And now all of that gets sped up. It becomes also about empowering those humans to use those agentic tools effectively. As we've seen, probably internally, but as I've seen with some of our customers at the moment, it depends on who's using it. It depends on how fast you can get those results and those productivity gains, so then you need to provide those sort of rigorous tests for those productivity gains. Sam, any thoughts from yourself on the advice that you'd offer CDOs in those sort of might be more operational focused as opposed to software business focus?
Yeah, I think they've got to analyze the places where the current AI tooling can actually help. Like, for example, if you're heavy manufacturing, I'm sure there are already robots and stuff out there, but the kind of robot scene probably isn't as popular as like the back office scene where you've got a finance team or you've got people in marketing or something like that, and there are tools coming out that can massively help with that. They can help you build campaigns, or they can help you, process invoices and all sorts of things across the business. So the key is to find the places in the business that actually fit, and I'm sure, like, we as a company, we do this, like, I'm sure they're getting ads on things, and they're getting salespeople calling them up about tools that would be useful. Try them. Like don't reject the phone call if something sounds really cool. Start a proof of concept. Don't wait.
Fantastic. Well, Sam, Julian, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today about how we've transformed Matillion into an AI native business, and also how we're helping other organizations do that with our agentic team Maya. I'm looking forward to us meeting again next time, where we're going to be discussing some of our guesses for next year's 2026 predictions and what's to come in the agentic AI space. But with that being said, thank you very much for listening, and tune back in soon next time.
Thanks for listening to the Agents of Data podcast. The podcast is brought to you by intelligent data integration platform Matillion. To discover agentic data engineering, visit matillion.com/Maya. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what you think of everything we discussed over on Matillion's LinkedIn and Instagram.